How much money does Nick Bosa's agent want?
Three. He throws to the end zone. And Davis 4-3 in the win. Oh, it's good. Crosby in on goal. Backhander. He scores. And good. 49ers win it.
Hello, faithful. Hello, Loki Legion. How are we doing today? Hope we're doing pretty good. I have uploaded in a couple days just because I want to make this Friday show a little bit more about the 49ers. I was planning on doing two separate videos, but I might as well just kind of not only save myself some time, but kind of work on this a little bit more, kind of especially have a lot of talking points for today's video. There's a lot of things that are kind of happening in the 49er kind of world, and a lot of things that I didn't know were happening until I've been doing a little bit of extra kind of research because the combine's been happening. So obviously John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are getting in their bags right now, trying to figure out who they should draft, who they should let go in free agency, etc., etc. So without further ado, in 49er news, the first thing I'd want to say would just be Tabor Pepper got an extension for 3 years at $1.5 million a year. I personally really like this. He was in my free agents I wanted to keep video. If you haven't seen that video already, I'd recommend you do so. I'll leave the link in the description for that. He's a great long snapper, and he seems like a really good locker room guy. I see his tweets occasionally. He's always spitting some facts out there, so I'm very glad we're able to keep him for 3 years on $1.5 million a year for a pretty decent long snapper. I'm not at all mad about that. Okay, so the next signing we did recently would be Javon Jennings. Restricted free agency contract got tendered for a 1 year, $950,000 deal. That's an absolute steal in my opinion. Very solid wide receiver 3. He's very important for our first down red zone production. Wide receiver contracts, as we have been knowing, are becoming very expensive, very costly. They're generally around some of the most highest paid non-quarterback positions other than like edge rushers. So having one on an extremely team-friendly deal, especially for what I feel the production is compared to how much he's making, awesome steal. Very happy we were able to keep him. For a little bit, I wasn't sure just because I did not know if we wanted to grab another person. I'm not really sure for like from the draft or whatever, but I'm very glad we got Javon Jennings for at least 1 more year. So one thing I guess I didn't really consider would just be, I kind of just thought Robbie Gould would be a little bit more of a shoo-in for just our kicker position for the next couple of years or so. Obviously, he's in his late 30s now, so he's not going to be maybe as reliable, and he got hurt a couple of times in the last couple of years, so maybe I just thought we were just gonna sign him back without really any hesitation. But I saw a tweet recently. So John Lynch has signaled that he's very heavily considering kickers from this draft class. Obviously, I have not done any really in-depth hardcore research on the kickers this draft class or who's eligible, who's really going back to school or whatever. But my main thing would just be, I really like Robbie Gould, and obviously the age concern can obviously be a factor in why I guess John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan would not want to bring him back. But just based on the fact we have Tabor Pepper, Mitch Wishnowsky, and I believe we should bring back Robbie Gould. He's a veteran. I don't really think we need to go younger at kicker, especially because kickers can play for a while. So I really want Robbie Gould back, but from what I can kind of tell, I guess there's he wants to get paid a little bit more than the 49ers are willing to give. We can always franchise tag him. We haven't used our franchise tag on anybody else, and I don't think we're planning on to. So that's one thing we'd have to consider. But obviously, if someone else maybe can be leaving soon, we can always use the franchise tag on them. So who really knows on what they're planning on doing with the franchise tag, if they even want to use it. But I guess if we do, I wouldn't be surprised if it was on Robbie Gould that happened last time he was a free agent. But still, I believe we should just as long as it's not like something excess of like $3 million or whatever a year, we should bring him back. And obviously, if he just does not want to negotiate, he wants to get paid a lot more, I wouldn't be opposed to necessarily getting another kicker. But still, that's some news I thought I would bring up, because I thought Robbie Gould would just kind of be, as I mentioned before, a shoo-in for the kicker spot, but might not seem like that. So I just wanted to bring that up for you guys. So one thing we'd have to consider for the 49er offseason would just be the San Francisco 49ers have 11 draft picks, as I mentioned before, 3 third rounders, a bunch of 5th rounders, and some 6th and some 7th rounders thrown in for good measure. So for a team, obviously we're in contention. We're trying to win the Super Bowl. We're not a rebuilding team, so I highly doubt we sign 11 rookies to our roster. Obviously, I know in the real world they get cut, they get sent to practice squads. I understand how that would work. But at the same time, here's a couple things I will not be surprised if we do. I would not be surprised if we trade up maybe mid, maybe early second round to draft someone. Maybe because there's a lot of really good edge rushers, and I've been kind of harping that we need a secondary edge rusher to Nick Bosa. Obviously, Drake Jackson was a good pickup, but he didn't play as much towards the second half of the season. There was a lot of kind of rumblings about what's going on with that. And I prefer an older player, especially as I mentioned before, a Javon Hargraves type guy, someone who's been there before on another contending team. But us getting a younger cornerback, maybe a DB, who really knows? I wouldn't be surprised if that happens either. I can see the 49ers trending up to maybe draft one of those players because they're all very interesting secondary players. So that's another possibility we might want to entertain as a 49er fan base. But I just don't see how we sign 11 rookies, especially. I understand we're losing a lot of free agents, but I would imagine we bring back a good amount of them, and then we're going to sign, obviously, other teams' free agents. So 11 rookies. I wouldn't be surprised if we have 3 third-round picks. I doubt we use all of them to draft players. I wouldn't be surprised if we trade maybe one. Probably, I feel like we'd trade 2, maybe to go up to, like as I mentioned before, second round, trade a couple of the fifth rounds. I don't think we trade up to the first round. First round picks are at a commodity. They're very, very expensive now just because I was having this conversation with my dad, but just first round picks, they have the 5th-year option, and if you want to draft a quarterback, wide receiver, or whatever, you have an extra year on the contract. You don't get that in the later picks. So that's just so much more impactful for keeping a player around, negotiating, etc., etc. So if you do want a first round, it'd be very expensive, and I don't think we necessarily need to be messing around with the first round. This team, John Lynch has proven multiple times he can draft guys like in the 6th round, 5th round, etc., etc. So I don't think we'll trade up that far if we do trade up at all in the draft, but probably the max would be second. Or of course we can use the picks to draft, or I'm not draft, but we can always use the picks to trade for a veteran guy, someone who's on another roster. With our cap situation, I could see maybe us signing like one kind of quality like free agent or trading for someone, but still I'm not too sure about that. I'm not sure who exactly the 49ers would have in mind for trading for like a veteran. So we'd have to see about that. We have to see if there's any kind of disgruntled players, some players who want out. Maybe we can kind of swoop someone from there. But we have to really see on the veteran talk, see if we trade up for anybody or trade for anybody. So next order of business about kind of that cap room I was talking about. Nick Bosa wants, or his agent to be more specific, but they want a lot of money. And we're not to talk about that just because Nick Bosa's contract, from the rumor, obviously this is nothing official. This is just kind of from the rumors I can tell and from what I'm picking up. The contracts might start at around $35 million a year. And I will not be surprised if he gets $40 million a year. Obviously, I wish it could be with the 49ers, but if another team would want to pay him $40 million a year, unless we franchise tag him, that could also be a very real possibility. And the next highest paid non-QB would be, I think, is around like 25 million or so, like 30 million. So he would kind of shatter that, especially for a defensive player. He'd shatter the amount of the make in a year. So we kind of have to talk about this just because, as I mentioned before, we need Nick Bosa because he is our pass rush, especially for the time being. We saw what happened in the championship game. Without Nick Bosa, we kind of don't have a pass rush, especially when we lost guys like Arden Key, even a couple years back. I know people kind of meme on him, but like a guy like a D4 when he did play, you get the idea. Obviously, we had DeForest Buckner, who was like a complete dog back in the day. Obviously, we traded him away. I will talk more about who his replacement is, actually. But anyways, so with Nick Bosa, I think it's one of those situations where we're going to have to pay him the money just because I highly doubt we're going to be in a position in the next 3-4 years to draft anyone that's roughly on Nick Bosa's production level, because we know the 49ers were in a miserable spot for a couple years, especially after the Jim Harbaugh era. So that's how we were able to kind of tank to the second spot. We got Nick Bosa, who is a generational talent, great prospect. Obviously, he's showing everything. He won the Defensive Player of the Year for crying out loud. He's a Rookie of the Year. He's made an All-Pro team, a couple All-Pro teams, I believe. Pro Bowls. You know what I mean. He earns that contract just because. Well, Nick, I say the two most important players on our team, and especially on our defense, are Fred Warner and it's Nick Bosa. So losing either of those players would be a death blow to how we play defense and to how we kind of run this team. So I don't see a world where we just let them go, especially for nothing. And I think we would have to pay Nick Bosa. Obviously, $40 million, $35 million, that's a lot of money. And who knows if they get exactly that much. I don't think it will be a fully guaranteed contract. Maybe it will be. I have no idea, especially with how a lot of players are really chasing that guaranteed bag now. I don't blame them. They only have a couple years in the league before maybe like a big injury happens. You know what I mean? So they want to get their money when they can. They want to make sure it's guaranteed. So we have to really, really see about that. But of course, the free agency talk, the only thing would just be who knows how much more money the players are going to get because the salary cap will inevitably increase just because NFL viewership is through the roof. The amount of money you probably make from like the YouTube TV streams, that's going to be happening. The Amazon Prime, the highlights on social media, they make so much, they make filthy amount of money. So I wouldn't be surprised if we really reflect on the salary cap pretty soon. So it might not be as bad as it might be right now. I'm assuming we do sign them. I'm assuming right now, the way I'm talking about the financial hit would just be if we sign him to that contract today. But if we sign him in a year or so, whenever he does become a free agent, I think that can kind of bear the load a little bit better. But still, we had to pay Nick Bosa that money. I think that's kind of the bottom line. He's a franchise player. He's a guy you want on your team for like as many years as his body will obviously hold up for. You don't want him to leave because if he leaves, he can be doing something greater of another franchise, and that would suck because we drafted him. We've gone to 3 NFC Championship games. We've gone to the Super Bowl with him as one of our best players. So I really hope that we do come to an agreement with him. Obviously, we'll have to see how about that. But that's one thing I do want to bring up. Nick Bosa is not going to be cheap, and we'll have to really see how the 49ers are going to draft, how they're going to get kind of cheaper players, try to get as much value as they can because like a $35 million cap hit, even if assuming the salary cap does go up, that's going to be pretty gnarly to deal with, especially for team building. Obviously, it's completely possible we still win a Super Bowl, or at least at the very least stay competitive with that kind of cap hit with a non-quarterback position. But so that's something we would have to really discuss. It's something that we have to really start thinking about as a fan base, and obviously John Lynch is going to have to really start thinking about that as well. But who knows? Just because another thing we can have to deal with would just be the amount of money. If a player like Dan, obviously it's very hard to compare the value of a quarterback to an edge rusher, but the amount of money like a guy like Daniel Jones might get with like $40 million or whatever, that can really impact the production and the amount of money other players might get based on their production. So we will really have to see on how much more money these quarterbacks are getting, and because if quarterback is the most important position, I'd say edge rushers are also really up there. So we really have to see about that. But kind of speaking about another pass rusher, Javon Kinlaw is 5th-year options coming up really soon. I'm not sure when the deadline is to pick up these options, but one thing we'd have to consider would just be he's played 14 games his first season, 4 games the next season, 6 games last season. He has a career 1.5 sacks so far. Obviously, one thing we'd have to consider would just be sacks are not everything, especially for a defensive tackle. I think people kind of overvalue that, especially for some of these positions, but still only 1.5 sacks so far in his career. I thought it'd be a lot higher, but when I checked it out, when I was kind of writing the script for this video, it's not that high at all, and it's really concerning. So one thing we'd have to consider would just be, I think a lot of people would want him back just because he was a first-round pick. We basically traded DeForest Buckner for him because when we drafted this guy, we obviously thought he'd be his replacement, and he obviously he still has the potential to make that jump. The only thing is he's only played more than double-digit games like 1 time out of 3 seasons so far, so we really have to be careful. He's very injury-prone, and when he's on the field, his production obviously doesn't match as some of the other players we've had before, and we saw him in this roster just because I've harped on this before, but we really need like a pass rusher, like another defensive tackle, like a Javon Hargraves they keep kind of harping on. A guy like that would make this defense so much better than it already is, just because I feel the amount of time we give quarterbacks is a lot higher than people will think, because they'll see, oh, we're the number one ranked defense. They must be suffocating, and I think to an extent it is, just because our secondary has gotten a lot better recently, especially with Traveris Ward and Demondre Lenore playing a lot better, especially towards the latter half of the season. And of course, we had Aziz Al-Shayar, who knows if he's coming back. Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, who are the three best linebacker combination in the league. And we have Fred Warner, who's like the best linebacker in the league. So of course we have a lot of great linebacker to help out our defensive line. But as I kind of talked about this before, other than Nick Bosa, it's very hard for a defensive line to really get after the quarterback. They have no problem stopping the run, but like we saw this with Jalen Hurts, we saw this with so many mobile quarterbacks where it seems like we finally break down the pocket and then you scramble off for like a first down or whatever. So as I mentioned before, if we can, I don't think we need another like super. I'd love another elite edge rusher, but I'd prefer more D tack, more of like a pass rush D tackle, someone that can really get after the quarterback from the inside. So Nick Bosa not having to do all the work from the outside. So, and Javon Kinlaw, unfortunately, has not provided that level of depth and production we thought he would when he was drafted a couple years back. So we'll really have to take into account if we want to pick up his fifth-year option. Based on how much depth we've gotten from later round picks, I don't think we pick it up, just unless like if this season or whatever happens, if he has like a crazy breakout year, obviously that can change things, but as of right now, I don't think that's going to be in his future. To be a San Francisco 49er for the long term. So that's another thing I want to kind of bring up. So in some Brock Purdy news, he had a UCL inflammation. Obviously, we know that he tore his UCL in the NFC Championship game, and because of the amount of inflammation and just the amount of general discomfort that he's been having, the surgery has been delayed. I believe it should be still happening within the next couple of weeks or so. But one thing I have to talk about with Brock Purdy will just be, we really don't know what the timeline is for him to come back, just because I'm assuming, I believe it's Tommy John surgery. I'm not a doctor or anything like that, so I could be incorrect on that, just because of how he tore his elbow. So he has to see a specialist, I believe, who's worked with the Rangers and a couple other baseball teams. Some other, I believe he worked with some universities as well. So we'll have to see on Purdy's health. We have to see when he actually does get surgery, because I believe the way we were kind of initially presented this news would just be that it seemed that after the NFC Championship game, he would go get surgery pretty soon after, but obviously that's not happened. The Super Bowl has already ended, and we're at the Combine. He still has not had a surgery, successful or not. So based on that kind of information, that kind of tells me they're waiting on it. Brock Purdy's and his camp is waiting on a little bit. They don't want to rush anything. They don't want to have a botched surgery or anything like that, and I get it completely. So one thing I don't have to bring up with Brock Purdy would just be, if he does get a successful surgery, God, I really hope he does, but assuming he does, it still take at the bare minimum maybe 6 months or so before he's able to come back. And I'm not sure if, obviously, a UCL tear is something very hard to come back from, but it's been possible. We've seen quarterbacks, they have done it before, so we have to really see on how that's going to play out. So assuming he does get a successful surgery, it can take 6-7 months for maybe to come back. It could take even longer. So I think that can be very interesting, just because obviously Trey Lance has gone out of his walking bracelet recently, so he should be relatively healthy and ready to go pretty soon. He should be fully healthy by the time training camp starts and all that kind of fun stuff. But because we might not have Brock Purdy in time for that, if at all, I wouldn't be surprised if, based on the recovery, he might not even play. Who knows with Brock Purdy's health? So a lot of this is speculation, but at the same time, if Purdy does come back healthy relatively soon before the season starts, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that kind of quarterback situation, if Trey Lance will win or Brock Purdy, just because from what I can tell, the majority of 49ers fans, the majority of kind of a lot of the outsiders believe that Trey Lance will get the starting job over Brock Purdy. However, from how John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, some of the players as well, they're kind of, and some insiders as well, I believe Ian Rappaport was talking about it kind of in this manner. They're kind of under assumption Brock Purdy will take the job if he's healthy, of course. So we'll really have to see about that. But of course, one kind of glaring thing, no matter who wins the starting job between Trey Lance or Brock Purdy, we need a third string quarterback. So I wrote down a couple players I think I wouldn't mind at all, just because obviously Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, Tyrod Taylor, those are some quarterbacks who are going to be free agents who are kind of fit that backup role, and of course we can always draft a backup quarterback. I'm kind of blanking on his name right now, but we interviewed the quarterback from UCLA for I believe the 49ers did interview him. So one thing you'd have to consider with that would just be, I don't think we draft a backup quarterback just because having two young quarterbacks and we don't know the future of the position, and if we draft a third one and God forbid we actually hit on a third one in the later round, we don't need a three-way battle, just because if it's already kind of divided from what I can tell between the staff, the fan base, and whoever else, whether Lance or Purdy will win the job, if we have another quarterback in that situation, oh my God, it can get really ugly, especially really fast. It's already kind of chaotic, especially in 49 circles. So I don't think we draft a backup quarterback. I don't think any of like the higher ups want to deal with that headache of another quarterback maybe possibly breaking out in our system. So because of that, I think they'll focus on kind of bringing in like a cheap veteran quarterback. As I mentioned before, Teddy B, Brissett, Tyrod Taylor. I imagine we probably pick up maybe like a more mobile quarterback. I don't think we pick up like a pocket passer like a Matt Ryan. Obviously, Matt Ryan, he'd for sure be a backup at this point in his career, so we'll have to really see about that. For me, the quarterback I really want would be Jacoby Brissett. He last played for the Browns last year. He played until Deshaun Watson came back from his suspension. Jacoby Brissett is exactly everything I want in kind of like a backup veteran quarterback. He knows he'll know the playbook. He kind of knows that he is the backup unless obviously some players get hurt, of course. And I don't think he'd try to put more pressure on to get the starting job either. So I think he's mobile. He can run offenses relatively well. Of course, he's not perfect. He still makes some mistakes from time to time, but still, compared to the reason why I'd want Jacoby Brissett, especially from what I can tell, he's not injury prone. I could be wrong on that, but Teddy Bridgewater got hurt as a backup with the Dolphins and had to start Skylar Thompson. Tyrod Taylor got hurt, I believe, a couple of times last year when he had to step in for Daniel Jones. So I think it's unfair to call Brock Purdy and Trey Lance injury prone, because Brock Purdy really just got hit in an unfortunate spot one time, and same thing with Trey Lance. Trey Lance, however, has had some little bit more injury concern with just kind of minor injuries. Especially I think he had a thumb and a knee one at one point when in his rookie season. But so I think it's really, really early to say they're completely injury prone. It's not like a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who just had kind of nagging injuries throughout his career, and I understand that could be because of the coaching staff. I won't get into that today. I'll probably talk about that NFLPA report card in depth sooner rather than later. But back to the main topic. Jacoby Brissett availability is going to be the most important factor, I believe, for our backup quarterback, our third string quarterback to be more specific. So I'd really want Jacoby Brissett. I don't think he'd get very injury prone compared to Bridgewater and Tyrod Taylor. So that's why I like, if we could pick up any like kind of backup QB, I'd really want Jacoby Brissett. So I'm not sure if they plan on draft one or whatever, but in my opinion, it should be Jacoby Brissett, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's who we ended up going with. There was some other rumor. I'm gonna keep this one kind of short just because I don't want to. This seems kind of a little bit more zealous rather than anything else. It's kind of just based on more media stuff. But there's some rumors that Tom Brady might come out of retirement for a second time, and I know. I don't think he will, just because I think after how the last season went, it was very disappointing for the Buccaneers and Tom Brady. But there is for sure, I believe, confirmation that John Lynch did at least contact Tom Brady after the end of the Tampa Bay season. He just kind of had a chat with him, and he told him to come over, or at least talk about it. But I don't think Tom Brady comes out of retirement. I'm gonna kind of put my 2 cents to that. But if he does, and he does want to play for his hometown team, and of course my favorite team, I would not mind that. He's my favorite all-time player, so having my favorite all-time player going to the 49ers would be like a dream come true. But obviously I have to be realistic. It's kind of part of my job. I highly doubt he comes out of retirement for a second time. From what I can tell, he wants to spend more time with the family. He already has like the Fox broadcasting gig lined up. Apparently he wants to do stand-up comedy. Whatever he wants to do, he probably can do it. But I don't think he comes back, especially with how I don't think last season was physically intensive for him. Obviously, it was a football season, but just based on how his body language was, I think he was just kind of mentally done. He checked out long before the season ended last year, so I don't think he comes back. But obviously, people might ask me about that, or they'll talk to me about that. So I just want to kind of throw that out there before anyone asks me. But so the 49ers got a report card recently. As I was kind of talking about earlier. The NFLPA did their first kind of report card, and basically, they're kind of ranking you on the treatment of families, nutrition, weight room, strength staff, training room, training staff, a locker room, travel, etc., etc. There was some really kind of bad stuff that happened. Obviously, the Cardinals are I want to say they're a rival, but they're in our division just because unfortunately they suck, and their locker room, like everything for them sucked. The Washington Commanders, no surprise, they completely sucked. But there's like a lot of kind of shocking stuff that came up from the NFLPA. Apparently, Chiefs players were incentivized to play through like bad injuries, to not even talk to coaches about them. Of course, there were like rats in the Jacksonville stadium, so like the Bengals stadium doesn't even have like, I guess their plumbing doesn't work. But of course, I'm very proud to say the 49ers had a pretty good report card. The treatment of families got a B+. I think that has to do with like daycare and how daycare facilities, things like that. Not really sure what, I didn't hear anything like too bad about why that wasn't anything higher, but still, nutrition A-, weight room A-, strength staff A, training room C+. That's our lowest grade, and I just know the training room at Levi Stadium is really not that good at all. It's very small, especially for a professional NFL team. There's only like a couple hot tubs, cold baths. There's really not that much equipment to go around, and that can kind of cause, from what I can tell, a little bit of a jam when players are trying to use them. So I understand why our training room is ranked only C+ compared to our other rankings. But training staff A-, locker room B+, travel A-. So overall, the 49ers got a 7th out of 32 teams. I'm pretty happy about that. I mean, the players like playing here, and there's not too much drama. It's not like some of these other teams that just seem to be a complete crap show. Everything else seems to also be pretty good with the 49ers. So I'm very glad to see that. Just one thing I wanted to point out with the report cards would just be, I highly doubt it, but I'm not sure if that will affect free agency at all, or if that will affect any other outlook, just because from these report cards, some pretty serious crap came out about other teams, especially the Ravens. Like 3 players came out and said how bad their training staff were, and how they caused injuries, they had to play through injuries, and how they mismanaged their training. So that can really hurt the Ravens, and we all know Lamar probably wants out of there. So who knows if that can free up any other players that the 49ers might be interested in, any of that kind of fun stuff. But of course, other than that, obviously we kind of talked about the draft a little bit. Before I end the video, I just want to talk about just a little bit of research I have been doing about the draft. It's not really 49er stuff, just I have been doing a little bit of quarterback film kind of study. The only quarterbacks I'd say can actually provide a little bit of analysis on would be Anthony Richardson from the University of Florida and Will Levis from the University of Kentucky. I'll start with Anthony Richardson because I've only watched a little bit of his game. I am blanking on the game it was right now. But basically, for Anthony Richardson, all I have to say would just be, he's a very big quarterback. He obviously has all the physical tools in the world. The only thing is, obviously, he needs to develop his mechanics a little bit. But other than that, I don't have too much else to say other than the fact I kind of saw a little bit, so I can kind of comment on that. He's very big, very mobile as well. Will Levis, I watched a couple games. I watched his game, I believe, I know for a fact I watched his game against Georgia, and I watched one other game. I'm blanking on the game right now as well. But one thing I had to really say would just be his game against Georgia. I think that kind of shows why a lot of people don't really like him, just because that game, the major issue he had in that game would just be his mechanics are very inconsistent, to put it very, I guess, kindly, just because he'd be able to make like a second read, or especially on like a kind of like a wide receiver, and he has to put it kind of in a tough spot. Obviously, it's a tough throw between maybe two defenders or so, and he will just flat out kind of underthrow it just because his footwork is not the best. But at the same time, I was watching the game also against Tennessee, and at the same time, he also has throws where he can just completely diamond up the like he can make some very incredible throws when his mechanics are right, just because he has very good zip on his balls. He has very good accuracy when his mechanics are not failing on him as well. He also can really scramble. He's very big as well. He's kind of like, physically, he has like kind of like the tools of like Josh Allen. Just the only problem is, like Josh Allen, his mechanics are really unrefined, and he really has to work on that. And if a team like the Raiders, God forbid, they draft him, I could really see them kind of making a mess out of that, just because any team that would draft an Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, they're both kind of the same boom or bust kind of prospects. They can be like a Patrick Mahomes, or they can be kind of like a backup QB. Like, there's no in between for those kind of guys. Like, they're either going to be really, really good players, or they're not. Or they're going to flame out of the NFL. So I'll make sure to do some more draft research. Make sure to see where the 49ers are picking. Kind of check out wide receivers, cornerbacks, safeties, etc. And there's a lot of defensive ends are really interesting as well. So other than that, I thank you guys for listening this far. And if you guys have anything you want me to talk about, like any other kind of video ideas, make sure to leave them down below. I do plan on making an NHL video, just to also have a big video about the Brooklyn Nets Big Three. It's gonna be kind of like a documentary kind of video. So that script is very long. I'm just kind of working on that a little bit. I want to make sure that's a really good video. It's gonna be something a little bit longer. It takes me a little bit longer to make those. So, but of course, I want to post something on a Friday. Post something so I can keep you guys held over. Probably make also might want to make a couple shorts pretty soon. So I thank you guys for supporting the content, subscribing, liking the video, sharing, the whole kind of thing. If you guys want to support me, my Ko-Fi, Patreon, all that kind of jazz, in the description below, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a nice one.